Welcome to the She's Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hi, folks. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. As you've likely noticed, I've been bouncing around a bit, publishing conversations that were recorded pre-pandemic, where I'm actually sitting down one-on-one with guests, and episodes that have been recorded with guests from a safe distance, often thousands of miles away over Zoom. Today is one of those conversations recorded remotely. I had really wanted to chat with today's guest, Jennifer Louden, in person, and we had hoped to do so when she was scheduled to be in Seattle on a book tour in June, but that all went sideways when travel and pretty much everything else was grounded. So we decided to chat remotely instead, and really, I am so glad that we did. You might know Jen as a pioneer in the self-care world. She's a best-selling author and a teacher of workshops, helping people lead a meaningful life through wellness, creativity, and mindfulness practices. She has a new book out called Why Bother? Discover the Desire for What's Next. Now, there's a couple things I want to point out about this book and our conversation. At first glance, you might read the title, Why Bother? And think that it could be a bit depressing because we often associate sadness or depression with that phrase, why bother? But Jen turns that phrase around and helps you get to the root of why you should bother. And I love that about this book. The other thing that I'll point out, and I do gush about it a bit in the episode, but it's worth mentioning here, I don't think there could have been a better time for this book to get published because we are all looking for meaning. We're looking for purpose, for the reasons why we should bother. Jen's book gives us the roadmap to figure out why we should bother. She does touch upon the main points of her book in this episode, but of course, I'd suggest picking up a copy of the book for lots of details and inspiration. One quick reminder, if you enjoy this podcast and would like to show your support, you can do so with a donation through Patreon. By becoming a part of our community, you'll have access to bonus content, which is usually in the form of a question I ask guests. In Jen's case, I dive a bit deeper into how the book came about. And again, that is a bonus question that's for Patreon supporters only. As a Patreon supporter, you'll get a heads up about what guests are coming up and have the ability to submit questions to that guest. You'll also be invited to join our private Facebook group, and that is ladies only. Support of any shape or size is greatly appreciated. And, to me, it's a vote of confidence from you that you enjoy the show and you find value in it. And that is invaluable to me. I really, really appreciate that. Patreon supporters are raising their hands and saying, yes, I understand the value of bringing these conversations to light, especially at a time when we are feeling so much darkness around us. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/bebold. And if you'd prefer to make a one-time donation, you can do that too via Venmo or PayPal. And that information is all on the Patreon page. Okay, with that, please enjoy this conversation with Jennifer Louden. Jen, we were actually supposed to meet in person. I think it's in June. You were coming to Seattle for your book tour.
For my book tour and for my stepson's graduation from Western Washington University.
Okay. So two things next on you, which, I know. I'm really sorry about that. And this whole thing, like getting out on a book tour, you're not able to do that at all at this point, which is pretty sad. The interesting thing about this is that your book, Why Bother? Discover the Desire for What's Next. On the one hand, I think, oh gosh, Jen can't get out and do her book tour. What a shame. But then I also look at this book and I read the book and I think, oh my God, what a gift for this time in our lives in the world. And you know what? I'm getting goosebumps right now, just like by saying that. And I really mean it, because it's amazing the timing of this, because it is so critical for us to be thinking about, what you've addressed in the book. Everyone is going through it. Everyone, I think it's fair to say that. So what I want to do today is I want to dive into that a bit and talk to you about the book, and then really about how it relates to what we're going through right now and how we might be able to apply some of that. So first, why don't you, if you don't mind, give us a kind of a high-level view of the book and what it's about?
Yeah, I think it's the book I've been trying to write my whole career. It's my 8th book. I love my other books. Don't tell them this because they're in the room with me, but I love this book the most. And it is the culmination of so much of my life's experience and my work with people, working with them in different situations and capacities, and really a deep claiming of the things that I feel like are most important for us to really thrive in life. And the reason why I think the high level idea of the book is that we all inevitably, naturally ask the question, why bother, in our lives? And there's nothing shameful about it or weird about it. We don't have to hide from it. It doesn't have an easy answer sometimes. We may never use the words, why bother, Beth? We may say, what's the point? I'm too old. It's too late. I have no time. I have no time to bother. I have to bother about too many things. Like, there's all these different ways we language it. But the problem for us as humans and the way our brains work is we don't actually ask the question with genuine curiosity and wonder. We don't stop to discern because our brains don't like it. Our brains like to keep doing what they feel defended doing or safe doing. So we don't actually stop and go, what's up? What's up? What do I bother about? What needs to change? What has changed? We just keep bashing our heads against the wall saying, I can't bother.
Well, the interesting thing about it is that term, and to be perfectly frank, when I first read it, is it comes with this kind of Eeyore, like,
yes.
So we have learned to say that phrase in a negative tone or in a defeatist manner. And you have flipped that around and say, here's why you should bother. This is why.
Yes, that's the point exactly of the book. Like, it's okay. You're going to ask the question in a defeatist way, in a way that you think you know the answer, and it's not a good one. It's resignation and resentment and no, and there is no point. And I don't know. Maybe sometimes that is the answer. Maybe the answer is no, I can't bother about that. No, I don't want to bother about that. But if you're not genuinely asking the question with wonder and curiosity, you're never going to know. And so because of the way our brains are built, because of the way we're built as humans, we're going to keep defaulting to not asking. And that's where we go dead. And that's what we're being forced into during the pandemic, because so many things have ended or been taken from us or cut off from us. And so we're, I think, collectively falling into a mood. Not everybody. Some of us are really thriving in isolation. But even those of us, like I had somebody say recently, I'm an introvert. I thought I'd love this. I'm an introvert. I thought I'd love it too. And it's really starting to grind on me. And I think a lot of it is because of how we get our purpose and meaning. And some of those ways are they're not available to us in the same way. And we don't know what to do.
Well, how do we normally get our purpose and meaning?
Well, I would say that we get it through the story that we create and live of what gives us meaning and purpose. And I think we find that by owning what we desire. And I don't mean the level of an ice cream cone, although it could be the level there. I could start there, but it's really owning what has purpose and meaning for me. And realizing that that's going to change as we go through life and as things are taken from us. Like, you may have had a wonderful purpose and meaning in let's say your family, and then the kids grow up and move away, right? They do the thing kids are supposed to do, and you fall into why bother. Totally normal. Not a problem. If you actually go into this in-between time and ask the question and build the next thing that has purpose and meaning. Your marriage ends and you're like, well, that had purpose and meaning for me. Now I don't know what to bother about. Horrible. I've been there. But it's not the end of your life if you ask the question. And of course, sometimes we have life-altering loss of children or spouses when we're young, parents when we're young. And that is very difficult, but we can still go into this time and come out of it with a new answer of what we bother about. And the thing I had to learn was to stop giving up this person who's right here with you now, her future, her present, because the past me couldn't have what she had, what she wanted, right? We tend to sell off this person who's here now and say, oh, but you don't get what you want. You don't get even asked because you can't have what I thought you should have.
Yeah, there was something in your book that really resonated with me. It was I don't think I have it handy here. I thought I wrote it down, but it's how did you put it? It's being in between what you don't like, not knowing what you do like.
Exactly.
And it's that in-between stage.
This is the book for the in-between stage. And we are so uncomfortable in this in-between stage. And what we do, and we're doing it as a planet, we're in an in-between stage. We are in such heightened uncertainty. Nothing about our brains likes uncertainty. We are being called on to develop new skills. And if things have been taken from us or ended, or I spoke to a group of audiologists recently about the book, and they were all cut off from the work that gave them so much value. They couldn't do the thing that gave them meaning. And so even that's an opportunity. What do we do when we're in this in-between place? This book is a guidebook for the in-between place. And what we like to do is we like to say, okay, that worked. And now it's gone for whatever reason. And now I want to know what's going to work next. And we make the plan too soon. And then it's too small for who we're going to become if we go into the in-between time and get curious and hang out there and use some of the tools and ideas from the book, for example, or
right. But in the meantime, and I will speak for myself, there is, for me, it's less about fear. I know a lot of people are full on in fear mode right now. And our media has a lot to do with that, and
they do.
I think some of it is founded. There's a healthy dose of caution that people should have, but full on fear is different. And I see a lot of people in that full on fear. So it's not fear that I have, but the two things that do come up are fear and anger. And I feel anger more than I do fear.
Me too.
Because I feel, well, how does it present for you? And how does that anger work for you? Like, what are you angry about and how do you work through it?
That's a really good question. When my husband reached out to me when I was reading the news recently and said, okay, enough, right? That's not the way I want to work through it. Outrage, pointless anger will burn us out, right? It's not good for our
pointless. No,
I know. It's not pointless, but what are we going to, but how do we use it, right? We can't turn away from it. We don't want to deny we're feeling it, but at some point regularly, I think we have to face into, okay, is it political action? Is it caring for my neighbors? Is it we have to turn it into something that we can fit into our actual lives and action.
That's of service.
That's of service or meaning. Maybe people listening are like, the last thing I want to do is political action. I can't stand it. It's too divisive. I don't want anywhere near that world. Okay. What does your anger about the way the pandemic has been handled or the way leadership has handled? These are the things I'm angry about. We could have compassionate, clear leadership. We could have leaders who are saying, we don't know anything, but here's what we know right now. So let's do that. And that might change because this is unknown, but we don't know.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I have been, and longtime listeners know this, that I bring this up, that I don't listen to a lot of news just because I do think it is so negative. And in normal times, it generally doesn't affect my life too much, right? I just think, just focus, Beth, put your positive energy out there, focus on the positive things and don't get dragged under by that. And I have found myself, really interestingly enough, I have found myself now getting more educated and listening to more newsy podcasts and and reading the news, of course, because I want to be up to date on what's happening, with the virus specifically, kind of what the news is, and also how that affects travel, because my business is travel, right?
Yes,
So
of course, me too. That's how I got sucked into super reading the nitty gritty news, because I lead retreats, or I used to lead retreats. We'll see if I lead retreats again. And I knew and I had a book tour plan. So I was like, oh, so in January, probably the same as you, I started really closely reading stuff and going, oh, this is not good. This is not good.
No, I was in Morocco in February, and I was leading a tour and didn't really know what was going on. Knew that something was happening in China, that they had shut something down for their New Year festival. And I thought that was weird. And then all these people had masks on in the airport. And I thought that was weird, like coming back from Marrakesh, flying back. And it didn't hit me. Like, it took me some time for it to finally hit me. But yeah, so in the same way, you're also affected by this, and we're kind of keeping a closer eye on it. But it has, especially with elections coming up, it has motivated me to really look at this and say, I vote, but I have not been a political activist. And I'm thinking, you know what, how can I be involved, more at a local level, but also at a national level? How can I be more involved? So I think I hadn't
using your anger. Yeah.
Yes. I hadn't thought about it like that. So thank you for saying that is just kind of one way that I'm maybe subconsciously using my anger to be more active in terms of that. So so thanks. So, well, I think we got off, I got us a little off track there, but so right now, this asking ourselves why bother is such an important question, because either we are finding ourselves with a lot more time on our hands,
right,
and questioning whether we've lost our job, or we're working like crazy in an unsafe environment, or potentially unsafe environment, or unknown environment, uncertain environment. This is a time, like I said earlier, is that most of us, we are asking that question. We're questioning what we're doing. Now, in the book, and I won't ask you to go into details, but if you don't mind, can you kind of go through your 6 items of just kind of how to map it out? I think that would be helpful for people. And then, of course, they can read the book, to get all the details about it.
Yeah. So I came up with 6 stages of bothering, and they're not hard and fast. They're just distinctions that help us map out, it's a perfect word, where are we? And of course, these are going to overlap and loop back on each other. The first one is leave behind. And we've already been talking about that a little bit, right? When we are in an in-between time, and there's uncertainty about what we want to bother about, and that uncertainty could be anything from a little bit of boredom and blahness to deep despair, right? There's a continuum of the why bother experience. And it may be one area of your life, it may be your whole life. So the first thing we have to do is, what are we holding on to? Is it a plan, like me and my book plan, my book tour plan? Is it a way of being? Is it an identity? Is it a relationship? Is it a job? Is it? But this is how things should be. It's that holding on. And I'm not saying you magically leave it behind and let go, but you start to get a little bit of breathing room. You start to think, what would be available to me if I did leave behind some of these notions about what should be possible, what should be happening now. This is really crucial. I don't believe that what we can get out of why bother without doing some leave behind work. And it's scary. I was talking to a group of professionals last night about the book, and they were talking about, how hard it is to leave behind being successful at something. Maybe that success has grown stale, or you want to move on to something else, or maybe again, you've been fired or laid off, or your business is struggling. And you're like, I got to move on. But it's like, but if I move on, I'm going to be a beginner. If I move on, I don't know if I'm going to have success. That's such an identity issue, right? My husband works in conservation, and he worked for the top conservation nonprofit for most of his career. And then his program was squeezed out after 2008, and he went to work for other nonprofits. It was so hard for him. He went through a good year of letting go of that identity of working for an organization everybody knew, right? It was total name recognition, total coolness, to working on equally important work, but without that, right? Without that ability to say at a party, oh, I work for so-and-so.
Hey, I have a question for you, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but you said it took him about a year to get through that. Do you think that we need a lot of time? Because that sounds like a lot of time. Do you think that we need a lot of time to get through something, or can we speed up the process?
It depends. Like if you've lost someone in a life-altering loss, it may take years.
Okay.
And
Fair
if you
enough, yeah.
a job that he worked out for, I think he worked at that organization for 13 years, wow, right? And again, leaving behind, none of this is linear. So you're doing some leaving behind, and then you're moving to the next step, which is ease in. You're beginning to say, well, I matter, what I want matters, beginning to develop some self-compassionate grit, the ability to be gritty and engaged in your life at the same time you're being incredibly self-compassionate, beginning to wonder. Like one of the big important parts of easing into bothering is I wonder. And not I wonder about my future, my big plan, but I wonder what I want for lunch. I wonder what I could see today that is new, like just beginning to awaken wonder. The eyes of wonder, they open the door to desire. And so we just begin to get a little juice going and ease in, right? Again, not a plan. And then the next stage is settle down. God, we are the most distracted species right now, right? I say, you settle down to be with yourself and breathe and just feel. And suddenly you're like, oh, but did I call my mom back? You settle down to maybe do some journaling. Oh my God, I forgot to start dinner. Oh, did my Facebook post? I should go check Facebook. I wrote that great post. Maybe millions of people have liked it, right? And when we do that, we're constantly interrupting the ability to recharge, to be with ourselves, and to encounter that inner grace of stillness that is almost an alchemical process. Again, it's not about getting quiet to figure stuff out. It's about getting quiet so that we're with ourselves. And so
it's like shower moments.
Yes. I love the shower.
We're all in a big shower moment right now.
I love the shower. It's so funny. We moved into this house 5 years ago, and whenever we give a tour to somebody and take them upstairs, I'm like, you want to see my favorite room? Because we have a shower room with 3 nozzles, and I'm like, that is my favorite happy place.
Oh, that's
not the bathtub,
yeah.
the shower.
Yeah.
I like the shower on my head. So after we settle down, then we move into the core of the idea of the why bother process is desire. Is befriending what we want, not because of what it gets us or what plan we have from it, but so that we can feel the flow of life and inspiration bubbling up. And what we do and what we're pretty much conditioned to do is to cut off our desires, to judge them, to should on them. Very simple, like, what do I want for lunch? I really want ice cream. Oh, you can't have ice cream. Ice cream will make you sick. Ice cream will make you fat. Ice cream will make your blood sugar go up. Okay, maybe it's all true for you. Maybe the last thing you want to do is eat ice cream, but do you actually stop to feel the desire for the ice cream, to know what desire feels like? We've been taught to fear our desires, to I can't say that word, to turn,
commodify,
commoditize, something like that, to turn them into a commodity.
Yeah. Okay.
It's all about where's it going to get us? Where's it going to go? How do we look to others? And I think when we do that enough, we are telling ourselves constantly, I don't matter. And the shape of my life and the agency of my life and my sovereignty doesn't matter. And that's the fastest way to live in the why bother place. Because we lose our compass, we lose our values, right? We lose our way of discerning and choosing what do we want to do with this very limited lifespan that we have. And then after desire, we become by doing. And that's about experiments and expanding our emotional immune system and developing the capacity to risk a little tiny bit more without, again, making a plan yet. And then our last step is be seen. Share with people that we feel safe with what's going on for us, how our desires are percolating. We're a very social species. We are all experiencing that now, what it means to not be able to hug. We just had friends come back. They drove and lived down in Florida for 2 months to take care of her mom, not with COVID, but with cancer. And they just got back last night. When we're just socially distanced outside to say hi, and it's so painful not to hug each other, right?
It's really awkward, isn't it?
Really awkward, and we're just like straining at each other 6 feet apart, right? So we're social animals, and there's an element of being seen and witnessed that, again, we truly need if we're going to keep getting our bother on.
It seems like this all starts with the story. It all starts with the story that we tell ourselves. And I talk about that a lot, on the podcast about, and just kind of publicly about how I told myself for most of my life, I've been a traveler for like 30 years now. I'm going 30 plus years. And for a lot of that time, I told myself that you couldn't make money in travel until I had a job that was so horrendous that I thought, I got to get out of here. How can I make money in travel? So I flipped the question
Love it.
and changed my story.
Yeah.
And so I think, and you do talk about it in the book too, is like, we are so attached to our story and who we are or who we think we are. How do you change that? How do you change that story?
Yeah, I think that is, again, one of the core ideas that runs through the whole book, and all the different tools or different ways to start changing your story. And, we have to recognize that we're narrative animals. We don't perceive reality accurately. We can't even see accurately. We have a blind spot in both eyes. The amount of sensory data that has come in the conversation, the time we've having this conversation, most of it has been completely lost because our brains can't process it. And so we rearrange reality to make sense for us. And so we're always going to be in a story. So it's a fact. But can we begin to develop the skills to witness that story? It's always going to be limited. We have a tremendous amount of story blindness, you could call it, right? That's just things that we automatically assume. But again, the core idea behind the book is, how do we develop that ability to see the story that we're telling ourselves about what we care about or don't care about what's possible or not possible? Because the first step is always being able to witness it, to have some awareness of it, to not be grabbed by it. And that's what happened for you in that beautiful story of changing your travel. You had desperation, often a good teacher, certainly has been for me in life. Hope that I can do better in the future so it doesn't have to get that bad, but we'll see. Hopefully it can be devotion and love that motivates me. I'm working on that. And then we start to bring in the wonder. How can I is a wonder question, right? It's also a desire question. If I allow myself to want to make money, like, here's this thing that's been in your life, and to go, oh man, I desire travel. I love travel. I come alive in travel. It expresses my values. I mean, wow, everything about it. And if I honor that desire and then bring it again with I can, with I wonder, I might, what might be possible. Mm-hmm. And it's not automatic. It's not magical. I'm not saying this is like, but until we open that possibility, that door of the possibility.
How do you spend your time? Because you strike me as someone who doesn't waste a moment or fritter away your time. Like, you're a thoughtful human being. I imagine that you're not getting caught up, for 35 minutes at a time on your Facebook page or like scrolling through. How do you, because I think this is a really important point, because you can suggest to people that they analyze their story and they kind of go inward and they think about these things. But as you said earlier, like we're like, there's so much going on. We're so preoccupied with things. So how do you spend your time, and are you pretty disciplined?
That's such a good question. I could take it from so many levels. And one way that I really believe, and I think this phrase is in the book, is choosing is your art. Choosing is my art. And I think that we're often afraid to choose how we spend our time because we're not connected to what we desire and what we're devoted to. So we fritter our time, or we scatter it here and there because we're not willing to actually take a stand. And I think that goes back to really that sense of agency and sovereignty. This is my life. I'm 57. I've lost both my parents. I have a great sense of the finiteness of the time that is left to me. And I do sometimes fritter away my time, usually the aforementioned reading the news lately. But I'm really attuned to that sense of, is this an alignment with my desires and my devotion and the preciousness of my life? And I also have a practice of stopping, and I did it this morning. I had insomnia last night, and that's when my habits will fall away. So my habit usually is to get up in the morning, make coffee, and spend some time maybe journaling, meditating, drinking coffee, and then maybe exercise. It just depends on the day from there. Depends on what I have appointment-wise and what's going on with my body-wise. And this morning I woke up, Bob made me coffee, I'm drinking it in bed, I'm looking at the news, right? I don't want to be doing that. I'm so aware that I don't want to be spending my time that way. And so after a few minutes, I'm able to just put the phone down pretty easily and say, what do I really want? What do I really want to do with my time right now? Even though I feel fragile and tired and, that insomnia feeling, what do I really want? So that's one way to approach it. Another way that I approach it, I really believe in spending a fair amount of time planning my days before my day starts. So the day before, I'm usually looking at my appointments. I'm arranging my to-do list. I have a very specific way to do my to-do list. I'm looking at where am I putting too much in, because that's a real habit of mine that I'm always fighting against. And where's the time for pleasure?
Are you on social media?
I am on social media. I am on social media primarily for my business. I do keep up with friends lately, but I don't find it a particularly interesting way to know what anyone is doing.
The reason I ask is that because it's really easy when you are an author or you have your own business, it's really easy to justify being on social media as part of your business. Mm-hmm. And I struggle with that myself because my community is so much of my community is online and so much of my community is visual, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's travel.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think I don't want to be on there, but I have to be on there. And it's where, especially now, it's where so many of us are connecting mm-hmm. and really kind of grouping and, just finding community through there. Yet I want to throw it all away at the same time, but I understand the value of it, but at the same time, and then there's just that putting it in a box. Okay, 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at night.
Well, I think
fun.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the ideas in the book that might work for that social media question around work is the conditions of enoughness. What would be enough in facts and with some kind of time element? It doesn't have to be 15 minutes a day. It could be after lunch, or after dinner, or after lunch and dinner until I'm tired of it. But that you give yourself some sense of what is enough, what will satisfy me, because most everything in our life could be insatiable. You could spend the next year on social media and that's all you do. But that's not your desire, right? So how do you balance what is enough for you with your desire to have a successful business again?
A colleague said to me, there's plenty to do. I'm just not making any money at it.
Right.
Right. So there's that whole aspect of it as
there
well.
is. And that can really lead to why bother as well.
I think part of that is, I think as my friend as an example saying that is that I think he might be filling his time with just tasks, with empty tasks. Mm-hmm. I mean, they might be valuable, whether it's sorting photos and because he's a photographer, sorting photos and kind of getting organized, which mm-hmm. we all could use more time, to get organized, but there may not be a lot of purpose behind it.
I think that's a great question. And we, again, there springs out a lot of discernment. If we're feeling overwhelmed, if we're feeling depressed, if we're feeling anxious right now because of the changes of the pandemic, and we're I know this may be just kind of busy work, but it gives me a little bit of purpose. It's gonna give me a little bump to my day. Go ahead and do it. But when it persists in its meaninglessness, then I think it's time to say, okay, whoa, I have been thrust into a why bother time out, not by my choosing. And that happens to a lot of us for different reasons. It's not always our choosing. And okay, what am I going to do about it? What can I bother about? And maybe it's I want to bother about my business and I can't. And maybe you're going to find your bother in doing some community work during this time or working for the people, the soaring rate of hunger. Maybe there's some way you're going to connect your photography to get that. I've been looking a lot at a small business in my neighborhood, a bakery. They were in business almost exactly a year. They were finally figured out. They were finally thriving, and bam, comes the pandemic. And they turned it around. They have totally turned it around. And instead of going out of business, they are making more money than ever. And I really think that they just went, okay, what can we do in this constraints of this pandemic, which means no restaurant service. And they were a restaurant, not just a bakery. They're a pizzeria and a bakery. And what turns us on? Where are our strengths? And so they started, doing natural wines that you could buy and take and bake and just really, and I'm not saying it's all been easy or perfect. They're working their butts off, but they didn't give up and they went right into it and went, okay, we have to leave behind the model that we had. And
so they did it really quickly.
They did it really quickly. And they really really inspired me.
I've been impressed. There's a friend of mine. She's been on the podcast a couple of times, Sabrina Sayer, and she's a running coach.
Oh, cool.
And she's a race director and a running coach. And she pivoted really early on to get her stuff online, like immediately. And I was still saying, no, wait, this is only going to go on for a couple of weeks. What are you doing? Why is everyone like making changes so quickly? This isn't going to last.
Yes.
And she just pivoted, and she continues to pivot. And it just impressed me so much. And I have a bigger ship to turn too, but because, my tours, I have to plan a year and a half out. So it's a little bit more difficult, but it's really gotten me thinking like, how do I pivot a little bit more? How do I create more community? How do I tap into what else is out there? And that's also why your book, why I might not be saying why bother, in not even like either in a defeatist manner, or sometimes I think as you outlined, your 6 points, kind of that roadmap, those are really good questions for me to ask as I think about this. And
what do you have to leave behind? Tours in person, done, at least for this year, right? And very possibly next year.
I hope not this year. I still have a tour coming up in Morocco in October. So
I have a September and an October retreat, and I'm hoping they happen too, but they might not, And so part of that is the mental work that we do about leaving behind. So if those things aren't available to me, then what do I want to ease into wondering about? I also think that's another thing that I just want to say for those of us who are listening or business owners, the uncertainty makes it really hard to leave things behind.
That is exactly it. Like you hit the nail on the head. It's the uncertainty. If I had an end date, then I could say, okay, well, now I know at this point going forward, I can make other plans. But you're absolutely right. It's the uncertainty that's so difficult. And that one of the things that I've been saying is that I just have to act as if. So I have to act as if this tour in Morocco is going to happen in October, or I've got my own personal travel coming up as soon as August, perhaps, maybe September. And I just think like, I just have to train. I'm going on these races, doing these runs. So it's like, I have to train as if they are still going to happen.
And mentally, that's real. That actually is so brilliant, Beth, because mentally what you're saying to yourself is what I bother about still matters, even if it doesn't happen. So if I don't go on that ultra across the desert, it still matters to me. And I'll be disappointed if it doesn't happen, but I'm still committed to the process. I'm committed to the
process,
toughness of becoming that person who can do that. And it's interesting because we were supposed to run just a personal group of people, not in a race. We were going to run the North Rim to the South Rim last weekend and then go down the Grand Canyon with another group of people, a bigger group of people. And when we realized we were going to cancel, I actually stopped training. Because I was tough. No, it wasn't. I actually don't usually need an event to train for, but I realized I was too much with all the book promo, and I needed to put my energy towards pivoting the book this is these choice points. And that's part of what I'm trying to elucidate is these choice points, when we can like get our arms around them and bring our hearts to them and bring desire and wonder to them, they can become really interesting and maybe really fruitful. And maybe we come out the other side even more excited about life or our businesses or our runs or whatever. Maybe not. Maybe for a while it's going to suck, but it's running away from it that's the problem, I think.
What did you say? Denying it. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing that you said there is that you stopped kind of the training, but in a good way, you pivoted and you started working more toward your book, kind of virtual book sales, right? So you've moved your time, and it might be more fruitful for you in the long run. And what I have found is that I'm doing fewer things, but I'm spending more time on them. So I almost feel less efficient because there are fewer things being like checked off my list, but I'm spending more quality time on the things that I am doing. And I think that that's a really good lesson, a really good thing that we can take out of this is that we don't have to rush through everything and tick all those things off the list.
Yeah, I think some people are discovering that. I also hear from people saying, God, I like this. how am I going to keep some of it if life comes back? I've talked to people like, I don't want to go back to my job. I've talked to people who are like, again, that group of audiologists I mentioned earlier, I believe, and they were like, this is the first time, a number of them, I've had any life balance in years. And they're like, how do we keep it? And I'm like, the first thing you got to do is like, really notice you're enjoying it and what's different. Like make notes. You're going to forget, that's the way the human brain works. It's like, as soon as we're very adaptable. That's the good side of it. But the bad side of it is we assume the position of whatever is familiar to us really, really fast. That's why habit change is so hard.
Things just creep back in
very quickly, right? And we just go back to the shape, if you will, the shape that was familiar to us. So it's going to take effort. It's not going to be the exact same way, but unless you really recognize, wow, we're actually having family dinner, and that's incredible. What would that look like? Or I talked to another friend who, before the pandemic, was commuting an hour each way to Denver. I live in Longmont in Boulder County. And her mother had died about a year and a half ago, and she moved in with her elderly father. And she had this whole story, speaking of story again, that she had to be home by a certain time. She had to rush to a certain time to make him dinner. And now they're cooking together because she's working at home. And she's like, oh, Dad actually can cook. This is something we can plan and execute, and I can get home a little later and it can be not such a big deal. And, but if we don't pay attention to what's different, we're not going to be able to carry any of it in.
Great points. Hey, let's go back a little bit. And you mentioned that you've written, this is your 8th book?
I believe so. I lose track.
Yeah. Okay. So you have a number of books.
I do. I've been doing this since 1992.
Oh, fantastic. And I know you're really just a pioneer, really on the forefront of the self-care world, specifically, I think, for women. Is that fair to say?
Definitely.
Yeah. So really just an early kind of pioneer, to use that word again, in this area, really encouraging women to look inward and to take care of themselves, not just superficially, but really, at some deep levels. How did that all come about for you?
Yeah.
Where did that start?
Yeah, I always wanted to be creative. I was always trying different things, making movies, photographs, writing. I went to film school, and when I got out of film school, I really had honed in on screenwriting, and I thought I'd have really fast success. I don't know why I thought that, but I did, and talk about identity issues. And when I didn't, I got really depressed and really twisted up. And I would have this little inner voice in my head that would say, you need to take some time off from writing. You're really unhappy. You need to do something else for money for a while. And I would say, honestly, I would say exactly this. Yeah. When I sell the screenplay for $300, or it might have been $400,000. It was hysterical, right? Like this voice was telling me to take care of myself, to try something different, to leave behind for a little while this very tight plan that wasn't working. I was completely unhappy. And a lot of it was how I was approaching it. And try something different, ease into something different, go into the in-between time. And instead, I just kept holding on, and getting more and more miserable. And one day, I don't remember honestly why this day was different, but I couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't do it. And I called a friend who I was very jealous of because she was having some writing success and I wasn't. And I said, I'm going to quit writing for a month. And she was like, okay, whatever. And we had I just felt like I was going to die. Like I couldn't breathe. Like it was completely like almost a panic attack. I'm like, no. And then I let go. I'm like, that's it. I'm really letting go. I'm really leaving behind this idea of writing for screenplays for a while, being a writer, being a screenwriter, being a successful screenwriter. Hung up the phone with her, felt this incredible feeling of falling, which was actually a beautiful feeling, not a horrible feeling. And then I thought someone had opened my front door and said to me, The Woman's Comfort Book. That was that loud and that clear. I remember looking at the door. I lived in someone's guest house. And that became the title of my first book that was all about self-care. So I think, of course, making up a story in the rearview mirror, which is what we do as humans, is that my psyche was saying, you have no idea how to take care of yourself. So you obviously are the super ambitious person. So I'm going to give you an idea that will help you have a sense of identity, but you're going to figure out how to take care of yourself while you're doing it. And so I spent the next 2 years sort of trying to go back to screenwriting and going towards the book and, really seesawing, which is definitely something I don't recommend. And then I finally wrote the book. Everybody turned it down, but 2 publishers loved the idea, but not my execution. And then I executed it better, and they both wanted to buy it, and it went on to launch my career. So it really came from a deep psychological place of having no idea how to take care of myself. Like, and what does it really mean? I think I was 26 when I got the idea. Yeah. And then I think it was published maybe when I was 29.
So what were you doing at that point that you say you weren't really taking care of yourself?
Oh, my idea of self-care was do an exercise video and order Thai food. To me, what I came to understand in writing that book and so much more afterwards and all my other books and teaching and retreats and everything else is self-care is how you honor yourself, how you take care of yourself in a way that you can bother. So you have the physical and mental health to bother. It's how you stay on your own side. It's how you have a relationship with yourself. Self-care has become a $2 billion industry about selling us stuff. That's not what it is. I mean, sure, go to the spa. Sure, buy my book. Sure, get your nails done if that gives you pleasure. But it is the icing on the cake. The real meat of it is how am I showing up for myself in my actions and thoughts? How am I befriending myself? I joke, one of my most essential self-care practices is hormone replacement. Super not sexy, super not like, oh yeah, I'm going to take my hormone replacement today. But without it, I wouldn't have the energy or the concentration or sleep that I need, taking my other supplements, going for a run, right? A lot of the things that we do in the name of self-care are super basic and not sexy. And they're crucial for bothering.
Maybe this is beyond your area and it might be unfair for me to ask, but what about the person who is currently depressed? And, we're having a lot of depression and anxiety.
Absolutely.
Given the current circumstances. How do you even start to pick yourself up?
Well, I have had many bouts of depression in my life, minor and major. And so I would just offer my heart to you if you're listening and you just went, yeah, I'm incredibly depressed or incredibly anxious, that you're not alone. I think that's the first thing that we remember, that we're not alone in this, that it's not something that we've done wrong, that we're not broken, and it's not going to last forever. And we need other people telling us this. So listen to my voice in your heart telling you that and reminding you of that. And then we really need to realize that the pandemic makes it much easier to isolate. And that's definitely where I go when I'm depressed. I want to isolate. When the pandemic started and I realized that all my book plans, I got really depressed for the first time in years. I spent a lot of time eating toast and sleeping. And so I could recognize that it was still incredibly painful and hard. And then how do we begin to normalize it do we reach out to our former therapist? Do we get a new therapist? Do we reach out just to a friend? Sometimes being able to tell a friend, I am depressed. Maybe by text, if we're really isolating, can begin to break that bubble just a little bit, to be seen, that sixth step, which is so scary when we're depressed. I have a friend who's just got back on meds after years of not wanting to be on them because, so it might be going back to some solutions and ideas we've tried in the past that we're not sure will work. I think the reaching out, the community and the support in whatever way we can find is essential. I think also we have to realize that some of us are not depressed, but we're in this incredible sense of Groundhog Day, of hopelessness, of being blocked from the things that give us a sense of normalcy. And if we can try to create our own sense of normalcy in new ways, that is going to help our mood, right? We're because we have these rituals and routines and habits, and they really are stabilizing for us. We, as a species, are scared to death to die. I mean, at the bottom level, we're like, let's not look at that. Let's not look at that fact that we're going to die someday. And so we do a lot of things to manage that existential anxiety. And a lot of those have been taken from us. So we need to replace them with new habits and routines that are as healthy and life-giving as possible, and if that means setting your alarm again, if that means getting back into an exercise routine using online videos,
actually getting dressed for the
getting
day.
dressed, right? Okay. You don't have to go so far as to put on pants with a waistband. That is completely ridiculous, but you might get out of your pajamas. Seriously. When I was back in those early days in my 20s and so unhappy as a screenwriter, it was like, okay, I'm going to brush my teeth first thing. So you might have to start really small, but please, most of all, know that, you're not broken, you're not alone, and it's not going to last forever. And your life matters.
I have never struggled with depression. Certainly I've had sad times. And I do feel like even through this, when I have gone through, like in the last couple of months or so, if there's been a time when I have felt really sad, I think I don't like, oh, they say you should connect with people like when you're feeling like this, but I don't want to.
No, you don't want to.
No. And
Yes.
so I understand how somebody who is in the
Yes.
throes of depression, how
Yes.
they just don't, I don't want to bother someone. Or I do know, I mean, for me, I know that it's temporary, that my sadness is
Yes.
temporary, and it might just be a fleeting moment, or it might be an hour or a half a day, and then
Yes.
I'll come out of it. But one thing I did learn, I went to a Tony Robbins event a few years ago, and he's really big into like moving your body and
Mm-hmm.
changing your state.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and for me, it's music, and he does it too, kind of manipulating people in these big stadiums with music. And so I just put on some music, and then I can
Mm.
just start dancing, and I can feel really good. Just
Yes, Beth, and that's such a great example for when we are depressed or anxious or just this kind of hopelessness that, it's like the pandemic is just weighing on us all. The big plans don't work. They don't work because of the uncertainty right now, and they don't work when we're depressed. But one small move, I call them bridges, the little, just one little bridge. So is it get up and brush your teeth and, braid your hair, and if your hair has gotten as long as mine has, and put on some eyeliner, I don't know, and, put on your comfy but nicer clothes. Is that going to help? Is that the bridge? Is it put on music first thing in the morning and just roll around in the bed and, you're like, I can't get up and dance. Fine, don't get up and dance. Let the music just kind of wake you up to help you get to the next step of brushing your teeth.
Yeah, I spoke with a mental health professional, Janet Rowan. It would have been about a month ago or so on the podcast. And she said that one bad decision leads to more bad decisions. And I think that's an important point. And because I know it, like if I get up in the morning and the first thing that I do is I exercise or I eat something healthy, then it kind of sets up the remainder of the day to do that. But at any point, if I decide that I'm going to eat a bunch of chocolate or some crappy food, then I just think like, well, there goes the day.
Yeah, why bother? Why bother to have a good day? And I would just reframe that, again, just in this light of how can we have a life-giving story, what would be a delicious, life-affirming way to start my day today? What would uplift me? What would build a bridge to a next good moment? Trying to keep it in the positive and just small steps. And that way we can kind of stay out of that should brain that can get, and that shame brain that can get so loud when we're depressed or overwhelmed, for me at least.
When you and I chatted earlier before we started recording a couple of weeks ago, I think when we were on the phone last week, one of the things that we talked about was just kind of the excuses that people make. Either I'm too old to do this, or I don't have enough money, or that, like kind of those excuses. How have you gotten past those specifically? And I think what strikes me is that you told the story about something that happened to you in your 20s, yet you didn't have your book.
No, I didn't.
You didn't have the roadmap, yet you were able to kind of pull yourself out of that. So I'm curious about your own journey, how you maybe naturally cultivated this kind of thing, and then how you figured it out that there's like, hey, there's kind of 6 things going on here that'll help us through that.
I think the answer to the last question is I spent 4 years and 500 pages trying to write a memoir about my longest and darkest why bother time in my mid-40s that failed as a work of literature. It did not work it did not hang together as a book. But in the process of writing it, I figured a lot of this stuff out. And I also I could look back at all these moments in my life where I did exactly what I'm begging you all not to do, which is I freaked out in the in-between time and made a plan and jumped into action. And the plan was fine, but I wasn't the right plan because I hadn't fully let myself change, or I wasn't really committed to the plan, so I did it in a half-assed way. And so that was probably the single biggest thing that made me go, wow, I see what I didn't do or what I only did halfway. Then the other thing is in mentoring and writing these other books and leading retreats, I've developed other tools, and I could see how they all kind of fit in with the why bother process. And I was using some of those tools, of course, myself, or using them all, not always consistently, of course. And I also think that there is something about the way that I'm built. When you ever get asked that question, what's your superpower? My superpower is I'm determined. I'm not particularly intelligent. I'm not particularly talented. I'm not particularly, clever, whatever, but I'm really determined. And I think that helped me in a lot of those places. But I do think I got lost in excuses. I do think I got lost in my story, and that prolonged my why bother times or made them not the fruitful times they need to be. And that's why I want this book to get out there, because I want people to know these are actually fruitful. They're natural. This is the creative process of life. Of course, we fall into the swamp of hopelessness or lostness or purposelessness. How could we not? Things finish, things get taken from us, things change, we change. If we're not growing and changing, yuck. So we're going to fall into these times, and that's when we stop and go, oh, whoa, okay, what's going on?
What are you doing in your in-between time?
Yeah, this is actually, it's interesting. This year is kind of an in-between time, as much as it doesn't seem like, because I'm super into helping sell the book and trying to get it out there. And I'm also having to pivot with the income plan that we had, which was free up as much time as possible to promote the book. And so a lot of my income was going to be my retreats. So I am primarily in this in-between time of what is my work going to look like in the future. I'm spending a lot of time going back to my desire to make sure that the book gets out there, and then detaching that from outcome. Because if I attach it to outcome over and over again, I get so into why bother, because you don't get the outcome you want when you're promoting a book. Occasionally you're like, yeah, they said yes, but a lot of times crickets. And if I am like, oh my God, but they didn't say yes, or that didn't happen, then I just fall into blah, why bother?
Well, it's often that we don't get the outcome that we want.
Most of the time, really.
I think you use an example in the book about, someone who starts a business and then boom, boom, they make millions and they were overnight success, that quote unquote overnight success with their startup. And it doesn't, selling millions of books, whoa, household name. And it just doesn't, it doesn't happen like that for most of us. And I think that can be because the ones that do have this big success are the ones that get promoted the most.
Sure. And then we create often we work backwards, and maybe their PR does, or maybe our brains do, or some combination. And we create a linear story out of that is, and just like, and then we feel that something is wrong with us.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's why I say in the book, we need more narratives about the back and forth, the sloppiness, the starts and stops, and, circular, messy process that really is life. And this, I think, quintessentially American, or at least Western idea that everything is always upward and better, and there's something wrong with us if it's not, is so unhelpful. It's deeply destructive. And again, it'll cause its own why bother, its own despair, its own depression, because we feel like we're not fitting in to the model. I was talking to someone in one of the book groups I've been speaking to, and she's a professor, a minister, and studying to be a psychoanalyst. And she's like, but it all doesn't fit together. I'm like, are you kidding me? It totally fits together. Your signature theme is clearly going deep and helping people find their inner life and their inner path. And does it not fit together just because it doesn't fit the outside picture of what it's supposed to look like?
Well, I love the idea of giving ourselves permission to allow for the kind of the fits and starts, because I think that we do. I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I think that I do have this, like, this happens and then this happens and this happens. And no, sometimes it's, 2 steps backward, 1 step forward, or 1 step backward, 2 step forward. It's just, it's a back and forth and kind of figuring it out. And if we allow that, and to use your term, I think it's like to relax into it, then then we can enjoy the process as well.
It's so, you just made such a beautiful distinction there, which is when we're not caught up in how it's supposed to turn out, which is almost always a fantasy and a construction and a projection, and we can actually be here in what we're doing and what's happening, we're so much more resourceful. We're so much more full of wonder, and it's so much easier to leave behind what is not working for us, or not working again, I'm thinking business, like, or I'll just keep using book promotion plan. Oh, wow, I'm getting this part, this is getting no traction. For example, we've had a really hard time getting mainstream media attention because the pandemic has been so loud. So I can notice it's draining my energy, it's draining money, I can stop. But if I'm held on to the idea that I have to get on CNN and that's the only way that I am going to be successful or that my book matters, wow.
Yeah, screw mainstream media.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Screw mainstream media.
Yeah, really.
And as books anyway.
And as I started the conversation out, right, it's word of mouth, right? That's
word of
kind
mouth.
of hand selling, as they say. This book is such an amazing gift at a time, at this time, I'm just,
thank you.
I just can't believe the timing of it. It's just, I'm sorry that it happened at this time, but there couldn't be a better book to address this time as well. As we just kind of wrap up here, is there anything else that you'd like to share that I didn't ask about or I didn't cover?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I really discovered when I was writing the book that gives me so much hope, and I really want to extend this to everybody who's feeling a sense of hopelessness or blahness, is I really believe that life doesn't give up on us. And you can call it whatever you want. I just call it life. And that if we can just meet it even a quarter of an inch of the way, if we can just open the door to life, it comes rushing in. And it comes rushing in to inspire us and to give us energy and to give us well-being. And we fall into thinking, especially maybe at times like this, that we have to do this all by ourselves, that this is and I don't mean all by ourselves without other people, but like there's nothing larger than us that's going to help us. And we've all had so many experiences in our lives when we just opened up a little bit, when we changed our mindset a little bit, when we made a little bit of a commitment, when we took a little bit of a risk, and suddenly, wow, so many great things happen. And I don't mean like, and then we found the suitcase full of money, but that we found that we trusted ourselves again, that we had some intention and energy to work towards something. So I just want us to remember that life doesn't give up on us, and we don't have to give up on life.
Where do you get your optimism from?
I think it's just the way I'm built. I'm an optimistic person. I can read the news. I could go away, y'all, and read the news for 5 minutes and come back and not sound like an optimistic person. So I think also I've really learned the difference between being cynical and being naively optimistic and being skeptical. And I want to be skeptical. I want to be someone who thinks and who does the hard work and doesn't take the easy answers. And I think that feeds my optimism, because easy answers, it's easy to go, oh, everything's going to work out. Yeah. Or say nothing's ever going to work out. The world is terrible. Neither of those extremes are true. Neither of those extremes are true. And in the middle is this really juicy, interesting place.
So you see a skeptic as being, maybe not all skeptics are like this, but you, in your world as a skeptic, it's an optimistic skeptic.
Yeah, it's an optimistic. He's willing to dig in and say, okay, now tell me more about that, or let me read more about that. Or, if you look at any news story and you actually do some research, you find there's so many different points of view. And I don't mean this in becoming a moral relativist. I mean, wow, there are so many ways that reality is so complex and change is so complex. And then we don't give up. We don't default into why bother, because either option, we see it for what it is, which is kind of silly to be cynical or, wow, everything's great. Everything happens for a reason. Really? No, I don't believe everything happens for a reason, but I believe I can learn from it.
Yeah, it's hard when you read the news and especially like right now, because what is said today is different than what was said yesterday and will certainly be different than what is said tomorrow. And so, we're being yanked around. If we are paying attention to that stuff, we're really being yanked around quite a bit.
Yes, but we're also, I would say, where are we getting our news from and what process are we reading it? I don't watch news, but reading it or listening to it or however you take it in, what's our engagement? And that's where the healthy skepticism, can't say that word suddenly. And I'm not saying like I'm sitting here with my arms folded. I'm saying I'm in an attitude of wonder and curiosity. Wearing masks is a perfect example. Like the data on wearing masks is pretty darn convincing, and it has been for a long time, but that message didn't get out.
Because we didn't have any masks.
I know. True. True. And the CDC in America was afraid that we would take them away from other people that needed them. In the
Right. The
front lines.
N95s.
Yeah.
I know. I listened to a podcast, someone who's I don't think he's quite a conspiracy theorist, but he might be a little bit on the crazy side. And I just listened to one episode where he was talking about why wear a mask? Like there's no need for a mask kind of thing where you're sucking in the particles, you're just rebreathing in, the virus if you do have it. It was a little bit crazy because then it's like, that's if you're wearing it all day long, and no one's wearing it all day long. So it just did not make sense. But
yeah. And that's that healthy skepticism. Our brains don't want to do that. Our brains want to go, okay, I'm going to hold on to this. I mean, that's why people like conspiracy theories. They give you a view of the world.
Yeah.
And it's black and white, right? And then you're like, okay, I'm safe. I got it. I know. And also it makes us feel superior because we're like, look what I know. And you don't know that. That will certainly not work well for a curious, life-giving attitude.
Yeah, I love that. The curious perspective. Great. What I like to do is I like to end these conversations by asking, what does it mean to you to be bold?
I think it means listening to myself, taking the time to slow down and listen to myself and be myself fully. And so for maybe a fair portion of my life, instead, I would think, okay, what do I need to do here to be liked? What do I need to do here to perform? What do I need to do here to be successful at this? Which is very outer directed. So to me, being bold is really about coming into myself first. And I have some Post-it notes here by my desk. And one says, was I fully me today? So that means that's very bold for me. And I was thinking today, I mentioned earlier, our friends came back and I thought, I can't wait to see them. And then there's this little passing thought that was like, don't be too like I can be like a puppy, like, I'm so happy to see you. And I'm like, oh, shut up, Jennifer. Of course you're going to be like a puppy. Like, that's so you. So that to me is boldness.
Finally, where can people find you?
Yeah, my book is available wherever books are sold in all formats, including the audiobook, which I read myself.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. And
hey, I will say too that there are a number of local independent bookstores that are at least open, like in Washington State. We're still most of us are in kind of this phase 1 where it's curbside pickup, but it is available. So I would encourage people to order from their local bookstore.
Yes, that'd be great if you
like
can
a curbside pickup. Mm-hmm.
That would be amazing. And if not, of course, it's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all those places too. And then you can, if you're listening and you're like, I'm not sure I want to read the book yet, or, great. You can go to jenniferlouden.com and hit sign up and we'll send you the first chapter for free. And if you've already bought the book, you can you can go to jenniferlouden.com/why-bother. And we got some prizes for you, some gifts. Yeah. So either one of those places, and get on my email list, and I do good things there.
Are you an Instagram or Facebook?
I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, and
okay, great. I'll get that information from you, and I'll add it to the show notes.
So great, thank you.
So, Jen, really, thank you so much. I'm really sorry. I know that you have family ties here in Seattle, so when you are here, I would love to get together.
That'd be great, Beth. That'd be wonderful.
Maybe we can record again, kind of a post-COVID episode, and reflect back on this crazy time.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah. And thanks so much. Really appreciate your time.
Appreciate the interview. Thank you, Beth.
Wasn't she inspiring? That conversation and her book really made me think about the possibilities ahead of me during this time of pause, you could say. What motivates me? What really gets my juices flowing? Now, I haven't sorted it all out yet, but certainly my journal is filling up with ideas. You can find links to Jen's website and social media accounts, as well as things we talked about in this episode, in the show notes at shesboldpodcast.com/episodes, or wherever you listen to this podcast. If you'd like to support the show and let me know how much you are inspired by these conversations and how much you look forward to hearing the uplifting stories from my guests, go to patreon.com/bebold. Patreon supporters get to submit questions for me to ask guests and become part of our private Facebook group. They also get access to bonus content, including questions I ask of the guests. Of course, there are other ways to support the show. You can leave feedback on whatever podcast app you're listening to. You can make sure you're subscribed, and that actually helps me show up higher in search results. And please, please, please share these episodes with friends. The number one way people find out about podcasts is word of mouth. To keep up with me and all of my adventures, you can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram at both Beth Witwa and Wandergal. Again, links to those in the show notes. Feel free to leave a message or question at 877-280-5170. You can also email me at beth@shesboldpodcast.com. Let me know what you are bothering about these days. What is getting your juices flowing? Ladies, don't forget to join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Be Bold group for support and encouragement for whatever ways you're trying to be bold. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. And until next time, be bold.